Hi, good evening. Thank you for coming tonight to our first event of the year at Hunter College. Tonight we have a special event with very honorable guests, and we're very honored to have them here today. First, I'd like to make an introduction. Our catastrophe started when we were forced from our homes under threats from Zionist militias and told it was temporary. We didn't know we would never see our land again. We didn't know we were the people without the land. We didn't just face exile. We faced homelessness, impoverishment, humiliation, and neglect from the international community. That was the Nakba. Tonight I will introduce a survivor from the violence that Palestinians in 1948 faced under the Nakba. The Nakba is the catastrophe when over 750,000 Palestinians were forced outside of their homes and land, and until now are denied the right to return. It's a basic human right that the UN has actually respected according to its resolution 192. And for decades, the right to return has been demanded by Palestinians. Khawla Hammad has been a stateless refugee in Lebanon for 69 years. At the age of 16, she was expelled from her village of Kabri in Palestine. Now she is 84 years old and still a refugee in Lebanon. With no citizenship in any country at all, Israel expelled most of the population in 1948 and has prevented them from returning to their homes. Kabri and hundreds of other towns and villages were leveled to the ground, a crime that Palestinians call al-Nakba, or the catastrophe. But Israel did not stop there. It reportedly repeatedly attacked Palestinian refugees in Lebanon, killing 3 of Khawla's children, among many others. Before the Nakba, Khawla's father also lost his life as a Palestinian freedom fighter. Khawla has a message that she wants to bring to our communities here. So does 23-year-old Palestinian refugee, journalist, and translator Amena Elashkar, who many of you might have known from last year. Khawla and Amena have a different message from other Palestinians. They are not living under Israeli occupation. Israel does not allow them to visit their homes. As exiles, they have a different perspectives from Palestinians in Jerusalem, the West Bank, Gaza, and the part of Palestine that became Israel, 48. So now, we would like to hear their stories. Please welcome with me Amena and Khawla.
Knowing his life is at risk before he's dead. This is the condition that he's living in.
بلاقي البيت لبوسنا، بلاقي السلطان الكهرباء، بلاقي الحيطان، بلاقي بحب انه نأسس المخيم نعمله جديد. ولد وخزان والعاب، بس اكيد بحب انه اتفرج على السماء بالليل او الصبح. بحب اتفرج على السماء انه كيف الطيور بتطير او سلطان الكهرباء. في ملعب للبنات وفي ملعب للصبيان. المخيم انه ما كتير بيفرح الناس. لا، بحب ارجع فلسطين لانه فلسطين هو هناك كان بيتي، بس اسرائيل احتلت عليها. Free Palestine, so Palestine is free. My country, my home, till the death of me.
She was born in 1933. In 1938, her father, he was a freedom fighter. He was killed by or assassinated by the British occupation. In 1948, she was expelled or exiled along with her family and all the villagers of Kabri. to Lebanon, and then in 1982, during the Israeli invasion to Lebanon, she actually lost 4 of her kids, not 3. She lost 4 of her kids during that time. And now we are in 2017, and now she is here with you, and she's going to share some of her stories. She's going to tell you how life was in Palestine before she got exiled, and then how she lived in refuge on the borders between Palestine and Lebanon. And she's going to try to share with you some of the tragedies she's been through during 1982 when she lost her kids. حجي خبرينا شو عندك؟ احكي لنا عن قرية الكابري.
أنا من الكابري. الكابري بشمال فلسطين، يعني قريبة على الحدود اللبنانية.
I'm from Kabri village. It is to the north of Palestine. It is so close to the Lebanese borders.
تهجرنا من الكابري ب 48.
We were exiled from Kabri village in 1948.
جينا على لبنان، قعدنا 7 أشهر على حدود داخل فلسطين، بس على الحدود اللبنانية. تحت الشجر يعني.
We spent 7 months between the Lebanese and the Palestinian borders in the wilderness under the trees.
7 أشهر قعدنا هيك، بعدين يعني إجا صار في متحدة وصار يبحثوا عن قضية ليش تهجر العالم.
And then the United Nations came and they started to try to help the Palestinian refugees.
الكابري كانت يعني بلد حلوة كتير، فيها مي كتير، فيها بساتين، فيها خضرة، فيها كل شيء.
Kabri village was a very beautiful place. It was full of water springs. It was full of fields. It has basically everything.
هدموها للكابري كلما خلوا فيها شيء.
They have destroyed the whole village and they did not leave anything.
كانوا جايين هن في شاريين مزرعة من واحد لبناني.
مين هن؟
اليهود.
Okay. So the Jews had the newcomer Jews have bought a land that was next to our village from a Lebanese man.
مش اليهود المحليين يعني. مش اليهود الفلسطينيين اللي اجوا من برا.
I'm not speaking about the Jews who were living in Palestine already. I'm speaking about the Jews who came from the outside.
طلعوا بدهم يستلموا المزرعة، أهل البلد ما قبلوا، كيف بدهم ياخذوا هالمزرعة وهي بقلب البلد؟
They wanted to go and take over the farm, but the villagers did not accept that because the farm was part of our village.
بترجعوا ما بترجعوا، ما كانوا يرجعوا، صار في معركة نحن وياهم.
And that's when a battle started between us and those Jews.
كانوا هن 11 أو 12 آلية اللي هن طالعين، ومعهن متصفحتين للإنجليز، وحدة قدام وحدة وراهم. They were 12 troops with two British vehicles. Their aim was to protect them. يعني دمروا كل الآليات واللي فيهم يعني.
The Kabri villagers destroyed all the tanks, and they also killed. They were able to kill those troops.
يعني ما كان في سلاح الحديث ولا شيء، اللي بالعصاية بالبارود اللي من وراء الإنجليز، يعني ما كان في شيء بالبلد، ما كنا حاسبين حسابنا.
Although we did not have any weapons because under the British mandate we could not own weapons, but we had some of the guns that the British army left.
فلحوا الأرض كلياتها، شالوا بيوتها كلها، ما خلوا فيها ولا بيت وفلحوها، وسحبوا المي اللي هي موجودة، ما حدا بيعرف لها تاريخ قد ما هي قديمة.
After this battle, the army came and they destroyed all of the village.
سحبوها على الجبل وعملوا هن المستعمرات على الجبل.
And they also took over our water and they transferred the water into another place. طيب حجي احكي لنا لما
نحن وياهم يعني اللي كانوا الأصليين ما كنا نختلف.
Although the Jews that were already there, we didn't have any problems with them.
بس اللي اجوا من برا هن السبب لكل شيء. اجوا عملوا 3 مستعمرات بين يعني على الحدود اللبنانية الفلسطينية ونحن قريبين على الحدود اللبنانية.
They came and they settled in between our villages. كيف كانت العلاقات بيناتكم؟ احكي لنا عن علاقاتكم.
العلاقات كانت مع الأصليين ما في شيء بيننا وبينهم، كنا نروح عند بعض ونيجي عند بعض وناكل عند بعض. نحن اليهود الفلسطينيين الأصليين ما بيننا وبينهم ولا أي شيء زعل.
The Jews that were already there in Palestine, we had no problems with them. We used to go and visit them. They used to come to us and eat with us. احكي لهم عن قصة
كل يعني اللي صار يلي هن نزلوهن بقايا الحرب العالمية الثانية ضبضبوهن وجابوا لنا إياها.
The problem was with the ones who came after the World War II. حجي احكي لهم عن لما قصة سلفك.
هاي لقيتيها حلوة القصة. سلفي خطب عروس من لبنان طبعا ما كان في سيارات يعني ولا شيء.
My brother-in-law got engaged to a girl from Lebanon, and at that time we had no cars or any vehicles.
راحوا جابوا العروس على الجمل مركبين على الجمل.
So we went to Lebanon to get the bride. So لحظة. So we went to get the bride. We went to Lebanon to get the bride on the camel.
فتنا بمستعمرة اسمها معصوبة.
And while we were going back home, we passed through a settlement called معصوبة.
طبعا هن اليهود الأصليين العروس بتنزل هون العروس بتنزل هون وفي غدا هون ممنوع انتوا تروحوا.
So I'm speaking of the Jews that were already there in Palestine. They were so happy about the bride and the groom passing through their settlement, so they insisted that we have to stay and have lunch there with them.
نزلوا العروس وغدوا العالم اللي جاي بالعرس كلها وبعد التالي حملوا شيء بلايا للعروس من الإنتاج اللي هن بيعملوه.
So they prepared lunch for every one of us, and they also, before leaving, they also gave us some of their products as gifts for both the groom and the bride.
وبعدين نهارية كمان كنا هن يجوا يتسوقوا من عنا ونحن نتسوق من عندهم.
There was also a settlement next to us. It was Naharia settlement. They used to come and shop in our village.
يعني هاو جيراننا هن نهاريا ومعصوبة وجويل هاو هن.
Those were our neighbors, the settlers in Naharia, Masuba, and another settlement called Juela.
هاو هن اللي كانوا جيراننا.
طيب.
وبعدين احنا يعني اللي هن اليهود الأصليين ما بنكرهن. وكنا عايشين نحن وياهن عيشة طبيعية.
So this tells that we never actually hated the Jews or hated anybody. حاجة احكي لي طب كيف طلعتوا من فلسطين بالأساس؟
طلعنا من فلسطين
باليوم اللي صار فيه القصف وهاي الأشياء.
لأنه صاروا حطوا المدفعية بعد الإنجليز كانوا مش فالين، كان تل الفخار هذا كان تقصف منه الإنجليز بالحرب العالمية الثانية.
So since we didn't have anything to eat, the Palestinians had to wait for the Lebanese people to harvest their grains, and after they used to wait to just collect everything that remained from their harvest, and they would take those remains and prepare their food from that.
بعد ال7 شهور اللي قضيناهن بهالحياة هاي على الحدود صار في متحدة. اجت الأمم المتحدة صنفت العالم على المخيمات.
After those 7 months, the United Nations came and they started to distribute the Palestinians on different camps throughout Lebanon.
أولاً فاتوا بنتي عندها بيت على حيط المطار بيروت الدولي من الشرق.
In 1982, the Israeli army invaded Beirut. And my daughter was, she had a house next to Beirut Airport, International Airport.
صار عندنا ماتت حماتها.
At that time, her mother-in-law died.
بعد الدفن الجيران عم يجوا ياخدوا بخاطرهم. إجا شخص صديق لإلهم قال لي أنا عاملكم عشاء على روح الحجة.
And the people started to come and pay condolences. So at that time, her daughter's neighbor came and said that he's throwing like some kind of dinner on the honor of the deceased woman.
قالت له بنتي الله يرحمها، قالت له يا أبو جمال يا خيي العالم عم تيجي تاخذ بخاطرنا، كيف بدي أنا أسكر بيتي وروح هلا نروح نتعشى عندك؟ قال لها أنا عم روح الحجة. قالت له من هون لهون فكوا المشكلة. قالت للرجال روحوا انتوا على العشاء ونحن النسوان خلينا.
My daughter said that she cannot leave the house because people were coming and visiting and paying condolences, so we cannot just leave the house simply. So her neighbor said, okay, so the men could come with me for the dinner, and the woman can stay at home.
قاموا ظهروا هالرجال بعدين ما وصلوا للبيت، يعني البيت ما فيش أقل من كيلومتر اللي رايحين عليه ليتعشوا. بعدين ما وصلوا البيت إلا عند بنت الباب اندق.
Just before the men arrived to the neighbor's house, my daughter's door knocked.
قالت أهلا وسهلا تفضلوا، فكرتني يعني ناس جايين يعدوا.
So my daughter went to open the door and she thought that they were people coming for visit.
وقفت هيك أهلا وسهلا تفضلوا، ما أهلا وسهلا تفضلوا، حطوا لها 30 طلقة بالشدة.
So the moment my daughter opened the door, they were soldiers and they targeted her with 30 bullets in her chest.
كلن جايين تعبانين، أخته لسهرة وبنت أخته ومرة من لبنان كمان عم بتعدي من الجيران.
And they killed also everybody who was there. My other daughter, my son-in-law, and another Lebanese family that was there.
بلشوا عن أبو جنب اللي نايم العالم وهي نايمة.
They started to just randomly shoot the people while they were sleeping inside the house. And most of the family just were killed at that time.
بثمان أشخاص وضلوا سحبوا وضلوا رايحين لأنه البيت منفرد ما فيش حواليه حدا.
The massacre resulted of the death or the killing of 8 people from my family.
هاي اللي صار. وابني كان يدرس كمان بإيطاليا، كمان جابوه على التعبئة الطلابية، كمان استشهد بنفس الحي اللي أنا فيه.
And also my son was killed in the same neighborhood that I still live in right now.
هاي مأساتنا. وشوف قديش نحن قضينا بالحرب الأهلية اللبنانية وشو قضينا.
And this is a tragedy, and we also endured too much during the Lebanese civil war and during the invasion and all the wars that happened in the area.
لحد الآن بنطلب من الله ونطلب إنه يكون هالشعب كلياته مترابط ومتضامن.
And I pray for nothing but the unity of our people and like solidarity with our people.
يعني أنا والله قلبي محروق ما بدي أحكي بس يعني.
My heart hurts me so bad. My heart hurts so bad. I cannot talk, but maybe if I speak, I would feel better. I think that's all the stories that she's able to share with you guys for the moment. In order to understand some of the stories, or most of the stories that Musa is saying or telling, we have to understand the history more. And in order to understand the history of Nakba and the Palestinian conflict, we have to go back in time a little bit, back to the 1800s and to Europe. Europe in the 1800s was witnessing the outbreak of anti-Semitism, specifically in Eastern Europe, and it started to spread throughout the continent. And that's when Theodor Herzl came. Theodor Herzl was the founder of Zionism. He was trying to find a solution for this, for the anti-Semitism problem that was facing the Jews in Europe. And he thought that the best solution for this problem is to found a national home for the Jews. And he actually introduced this solution in his pamphlet, The Jewish State, which was he wrote in 1896. And he said that the best place to found this national home for the Jews is in Palestine. Why in Palestine? Because a contemporary Israeli academic says that the Jews enjoyed them. He says that that's why Theodor Herzl introduced Palestine. Jews enjoyed a higher standing in Muslim societies and enjoyed a greater affinity with the culture of their surroundings than the Jews in Eastern Europe. Although back then, Palestine was part of the Ottoman Empire and it was under the rule of the Ottoman Empire. And then in 1901, the Zionist leaders started to use the false claim or false slogan that said that Palestine was a land without a people for a people without a land. And those actually photos of Palestine in the 1800s and 1900s, which basically explains why it was a false statement and Palestine was not a land without a people. And then in 1917 came the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration was a statement from the British government that said they are for the founding of a Jewish state in Palestine, although Palestine was still under the Ottoman Empire rule in 1917. But then the Ottoman Empire fell down and came the British mandate or the British occupation on Palestine, which encouraged more Jewish immigration to Palestine. But the main purpose of immigration was to found a Jewish state in Palestine. But how they're going to do that when up to 1946 or 1947, the majority of the population of Palestine was 2/3 of Palestinians and only 1/3 were Jews actually in 1946. And the answer came by David Ben-Gurion, who said, "I am for compulsory transfer, and I do not see anything immoral in it." Ben-Gurion was the first prime minister of the Israeli entity. And then in 1947, the British cabinet made the decision to pull out of mandatory Palestine, and they did not want to deal with the problems they caused in Palestine anymore. So they left it for the United Nations. The United Nations was still a very new organization. It was only 2 years old. It was inexperienced, and which resulted of, they thought that the best way to solve this whole conflict is to partition the land. And they said that we are going to give more than half of the Palestinian territory for the Jews, although they were only 1/3 of the population. And the Palestinians did not accept that. And when the Palestinians did not accept and they did not want to leave their houses or their lands, they actually, the paramilitary Zionist groups started to do what David Ben-Gurion said they're gonna do and started to massacre the Palestinians, ethnically cleanse the Palestinians. And here we have some of the massacres that were that some of the Palestinian villages and towns witnessed in 1948. We have Deir Yassin massacre, Tantura massacre, and Abu Shusha massacre, and way more other massacres than that. And in 1948, as Musa was, I'm sorry, I keep on saying Akram, she was our last Nakba survivor, and this is the new one. I'm still used to that old name. So in 1948, after the Palestinians were ethnically cleansed, they were forced to leave Palestine. As you can see, some fled to Lebanon, others fled to Syria, and others to Transjordan back then, Jordan now, which resulted of basically two things: the creation of the State of Israel and the creation of one of the biggest refugee crises in our modern history after the flood of 750,000 Palestinians to the neighboring countries. Now, the United Nations felt bad for what they do after they partitioned. They felt like they messed up. So they wanted to try to, fix what they've done. So they issued a new resolution, which is the 1194 resolution, the right of return, which was issued in 1949, and it stated that all Palestinians who fled in 1948 have the right to go back to Palestine, to their land and properties, and even get compensated if they do not want to go back. And that's why the Palestinian refugees, after 70 years, are still living in refugee camps, because we're still waiting for the implementation of the 194 resolution. Now, at this time, how are the Palestinians living inside these refugee camps? I assume you've seen already part of our life during the short video that I have showed you. First of all, see, you guys, I come from Lebanon, one of the refugee camps in Lebanon. So I'm going to explain about our conditions in Lebanon. But before that, you have to know that we have refugee camps in Jordan, Syria, West Bank, and in Gaza, and also, of course, Lebanon. So what are the conditions of the Palestinian refugees in Lebanon? First of all, we have 12 refugee camps throughout Lebanon, and we also have 15 unofficial Palestinian gatherings. The biggest refugee camp in Lebanon is Ain al-Hilwi refugee camp. Its area is 1 square mile, and its population is 100,000 refugees living inside this camp. And because it's the biggest refugee camp, we call it the capital of diaspora. Okay. And then this is my refugee camp, Burj al-Barajni. That's where I live, which is slightly smaller than Ain al-Hilwi. It's a third of a square mile, and we have 50,000 refugees living inside this camp. As you may have noticed from what Musa was telling, after the Israelis or the Zionists ethnically cleansed the Palestinians and pushed them away, forced them to leave Palestine, they did not leave them alone. They followed them into Lebanon, trying to get rid of the crisis and that they have created back in 1948. And what they have done, so that's why they basically invaded Beirut in 1982. And they started and they tried to get rid of, wipe off the Palestinian refugee camps. What we see here is the remains of what was known in 1974 Nakba refugee camp. We used to have this camp, and now it does not exist anymore after the Israelis demolished the camp. And then we have in 1982, the Israeli troops or the Israelis bombed this is Badawi refugee camp. They bombed it with phosphoric bombs, the resulting of the killing of 125 Palestinian refugees. Then we have Nahr al-Barid refugee camp, and then we have Ain al-Hilwi refugee camp, which was destroyed twice by the Israeli army. And now we are in the anniversary of Sabra and Shatila massacre, which was also held by the Israeli army in Lebanon in 1982. On September 16, 1982, as I said, the Israelis came into Lebanon because they wanted to get rid of the Palestinian fighters in Lebanon. So they had an agreement with the PLO that the Palestinian fighters leave Lebanon, and in return, the U.S. government would guarantee the safety of the civilian Palestinians inside the camps. And what happened was, that's how the U.S. government actually guaranteed the safety of the Palestinians inside the camps. the Israeli army went to Sabra and Shatila camps. They surrounded the camps, sieged the camps. They did not allow anybody to leave the camp, and they did not allow anybody to go inside the camp but a group of militias who started to kill and massacre the Palestinians inside the camp, resulting of the killing more than 3,500 Palestinian and also Lebanese who were living there. And they actually kept on doing this for 3 consecutive nights while the Israeli army was just besieging the 2 camps. Those photos were taken on the day when people were able to go inside the camps. And now we don't have any more wars. Like the last war that happened in Lebanon was in 2006, and we don't have any wars now. But are the Palestinians feeling, comfortable in their camps? Well, basically, no. Why? Because what you have to know is that the Palestinians do not have any civil rights in Lebanon whatsoever. They do not have the right to work. Palestinians cannot work in 72 domains. They cannot be doctors, they cannot be lawyers, they cannot be engineers, and 72 professions. They cannot work them. I'm a translator, and I cannot work because I cannot be part of the union, and therefore I cannot, work legally in Lebanon. They also do not have the right to own properties. Basically, you guys can go to Lebanon and own properties as much as you want, but Palestinians cannot do that because in 2001, the Lebanese government issued a decree that stated Palestinians are no longer allowed to own properties outside the camps. And if anybody owned anything any property before the issuance of this decree, the property goes to the government and this guy dies, and the property goes to the government and not to the family of the person. And then later in 2012, they issued a new decree that prevented the Palestinians of building any new houses inside the camps. So basically, Palestinians are not allowed to build to own properties outside the camps, and they do not have they cannot build new houses inside the camps. They also have very limited health access to Lebanese health facilities. We cannot go also to Lebanese governmental schools, and so basically the Palestinians have no rights in Lebanon, civil rights whatsoever. And why the Lebanese government is doing that, it is because they are afraid. They are afraid of what? They're afraid of the international community. See, the international community has been trying to solve the Palestinian refugee crisis since 1948. And they tried to do so by various means. One of those means was to force the hosting countries to nationalize Palestinians in their countries, which is something Lebanon does not want and us as refugees do not want. And that's why the Lebanese government is preventing us from our civil rights, because they want to show the international community that, see, we cannot give them any rights, so they are not comfortable with our presence in Lebanon, so they do not want us there, and we cannot nationalize them. So you have to find them a solution. But the solution is actually already there, and it was issued in 1949, which is the right of return. And that's what we basically want. We do not want to be citizens of any other country. We do not want to migrate to any other country. We just want justice, which is right of return. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
If anybody has any question to Al-Hajj Musa, we're open for that.
A lot of people have been talking about how UNRWA, which provides health and social services, their budget is going down because of the Syrian crisis and other things. So there's the UNRWA, which Palestinians are forced to rely on, their services are deteriorating. So I don't know if you have more knowledge of that.
About the UNRWA, first of
طبعا
all,
هن ما فاتوا على بيوت الا كان معهن عملاء، ما فاتوا على بيوت، شو بعرفهم بالبيوت؟
she's
الله
saying
بيعلم مين اللي معهم.
she's saying that they went into her house with the help of some agents because they were not able to, move freely in the neighbor. You know how the neighborhoods are so crowded, so they basically went there with the help of someone. About the UNRWA is the United Nations Relief and Work Agency for Palestinian refugees. So now, as you said, it is facing a financial crisis. The funding countries.
اللبنانية قديش صار لما فاتوا على لبنان، قديش صار في عملاء وقديش أخذوا لعندنا على إسرائيل عملاء وقديش ما فينا نعرف، يعني ما فينا نجزم إنه هن لحالهم.
She's just affirming that they were there. The Israeli soldiers managed to go into her house with the help of some agents that they were there. And as I was saying, yes, it is facing a financial crisis right now, and that's because for some reason the funding countries stopped paying as they used to do, and we believe that. Actually, we don't believe that. I'm a journalist, and I had an interview with the general director of the UNRWA back home, and he told me this like off the record. He said that the the funding countries are facing some pressure from you know who. He said.
Oh my God.
Yeah, no. Actually, he also meant Israel. That you know who, because they want to shut down the UNRWA because. They want to get rid of the UNRWA because the Israelis think that if they got rid of the UNRWA now, this is one way of actually ending the Palestinian refugee crisis. And this is why Netanyahu just called twice this year for shutting the UNRWA down. And so yeah, but. Now the UNRWA is not offering as much, services as it used to be, but we still want it to exist because it's it is the last witness for the Palestinian Nakba.
Thank you.
Yes.
So I have two questions. Question number one, because how do when you teach, because I'm Palestinian and I live inside the West Bank, so I know how it feels to be Palestinian. But from Palestinian living outside Palestine, never entering it ever. How do these, as a child or as a teenager, or the people who never entered Palestine ever since 1948, how do they grow up knowing that they're Palestinian but they can't go inside Palestine ever?
I don't know. It makes me cry all the time. So it is a very tough thing because the only thing we do is we go to the south. It is the closest point to the Palestinian borders, and we just stand there and look at Palestine. That's what we do, and we do this with the kids, like young kids, and we do this like annually because we tell them that this is our land, and we have to. We don't have to forget it. And inside the camps, we have all the neighborhoods, like we have Haifa neighborhood, we have Nablus neighborhood, we have Yafa neighborhood. And this is also a part of how the kids, get this while they are growing up. And also we have the kindergarten, we have the schools, they're all after the names of Palestinian cities and villages in Palestine. I think this all goes we grow up with this, and it's really hard to, live inside a refugee camp and not just love, it gives you hope. It gives you hope that there's something else for you in this world, and you have to work for it. You do not have to stay living inside those refugee camps. So I don't know if this answers your question.
And my second question, as a Palestinian, I don't understand why in Lebanon there is so much racism against us as a people that I just sometimes feel bad because I know Lebanese myself, and it's just like we never did anything to them. We were forced to go into our country. So why does the Sha'b Lebanese, and not just the Sha'b, but the government, and the Lebanese, in some cases, Lebanese people, they kind of shove us into a corner, and they don't give us the basic human rights. And even though we're the same culture, the same language, in some cases the same religion, so why do they hate us so much?
It's because they're afraid, as I explained in my presentation. They're just afraid of showing the international community that they're comfortable with our presence, and then they're gonna force them to actually nationalize us in Lebanon. And you know, to some extent, the Lebanese government feels like it is forced to deal with the results of the wars in the neighboring countries. So, war in Syria, the Syrian refugees, war in Lebanon, Lebanese refugees. We also have Iraqi refugees, Yemeni refugees. So, and Lebanon is a very small country, we have problems with the Lebanese government, but we have, and there is a solution for all these problems, which is the right of return. So that's why I did not actually concentrate or focus on those. I was not trying to show that the Lebanese government are bad people, but I was trying to tell that we do have problems with them, and we also have a solution for all those problems. Yes.
And I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit more about your daily life today.
I'm a journalist. I work for a Palestinian TV channel, and I worked as a translator for some, as a freelance translator for some embassies in Beirut. I don't know. You're asking about the daily life. It's really hard to explain it, actually. That's why I use the video usually to show people how to actually, make them imagine how it is like to live inside the camp. Because whenever someone asks me about how my life is in the camp, I always just remember the really narrow alleys and the road that I have to walk in and through every day and stuff like that. So is there some specific thing you want to?
Well, how about what's kinds of, if you could describe it like a gathering together, like maybe either at the mosque, or do you have social gatherings where a large number of people?
Most of the people who live in the camps are people who were exiled from altogether from the same villages. See, so we are all like big family. Like everybody just knows everybody, and it's funny because we make fun of this, but in weddings, it's like we have to invite 700 people to the wedding because we're all big family. Everybody knows everybody. So and in Ramadan, let's say, when we fast, and so in our holidays, when we invite people for lunch or breakfast, we have big tables, and everybody's just sitting together, and everybody knows everybody. So yeah, that's how it is.
And I wanted to ask you, I read about your initiative, but I wasn't sure, what exactly your project is doing. Is it for advocacy or around the United States, or you are trying to work with within Lebanon, within the refugee camps? For me, it's the first time I heard about this initiative, and we're working here, in Zuhot with JVP. So I would love to hear more about what you do. And the second question is about working with the third generation of refugees in the refugee camps. Do you work with them also about through processes of imagining the return? Is this something that you do? Work inside with the Palestinians themselves? You understand my question?
I guess so. Like what we do in order to achieve return, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. So first, for the first question, the purpose of this tour is to actually educate the American public about the Nakba, because most of them, know about Gaza. They know about the people who live in the occupied territories in 1948. They know about the West Bank, and they also know about the refugees in West Bank and in Gaza, but nobody, not everybody knows about the Palestinian refugees in Lebanon, and that's the purpose of the tour, to educate. As for the second part, I believe that the Palestinians just living and maintaining the refugee camps for 70 years is just a very, this is the most they can do at the time being, is to maintain the refugee camps and to stay inside these refugee camps until they achieve return.
I'm interested to learn a little bit more about how the different refugee groups are building solidarity with each other and the kind of work that you all are doing here. I grew up Arab and Ethiopian, so my family's from Sudan and Ethiopia, and we have a lot of breaks within the Arab community in Brooklyn alone, and it's been really difficult to talk about what does solidarity mean for our countries and for our folks fighting larger imperial powers like Israel and the United States. So I'm interested to hear about some of how that happens.
So you're interested to know about how we're building solidarity within the Palestinian refugee community, right?
Within the different refugee communities in Lebanon.
Yeah.
So like with the Syrians and Yemeni and Palestinians.
So basically we only have Palestinian refugee camps, and we open our doors for the other refugees. So this is part of the solidarity we do, we achieve. We don't actually, we don't have organized, solidarity movements. But I just can tell you about how people deal with it. They're, just opening their houses, trying to help each other. This is some kind of solidarity that you can witness in the refugee camps.
Just a question, does UNRWA support all of healthcare and educational opportunities in the camps, or is there some other source of funding and support for them?
No, actually, it does not support healthcare. I can tell you that it only covers 5% of what we need. Whenever a Palestinian needs a surgery or needs any kind of operation, we actually have to fundraise. We have to go knocking the doors of people and start fundraising campaigns for anybody. I mean, my friend, just 2 months before me coming here, he needed to transplant a kidney for his sister, and they could not afford that, and the UNRWA did not cover that. So we had to raise money from all over the place, from all over Lebanon, in order to get this achieved. I also had another person. He's a member of my family. He was sick, and he needed an open heart surgery, but we couldn't raise the money, and he actually died because of that. And UNRWA did not help as well. So UNRWA does not offer any kind of health services, really, really humble health. They give us painkillers. That's what I'm talking about.
That's it.
Yeah. And education is a very bad education they offer, because we have high schools, we have elementary schools, and so on. But the thing is that it's really bad quality education, and we have 60 students inside each classroom, and the classroom is actually smaller than this room, and the teachers are not being paid. You can imagine how a teacher would start to work when he's not being paid. And so this is basically how this is the type of education Palestinians in refugee camps are trying or are having. Some others tend to go to private schools, but they're so expensive. And that's why you only find really small amount of Palestinians going to those private schools. And about graduate studies and university, not all Palestinians go because they cannot afford to go to universities. So some of the Palestinians actually just they quit the schools because they think that okay, the quality of education is bad and we're not going to go to a university, so see how it goes. Any other questions? Yes.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Do the other refugees that have come into Lebanon, are they restricted by the same laws by the Lebanese government? Do you?
No.
No. And I think that I work at the UN as well on Israel-Palestine, and UNRWA is facing a daunting challenge. I mean, I just looked it up just to double check. Their budget was something like $1.2 billion, of which they only got $948 million, and they are responsible and have been. They were instituted in 1948 as the UN agency responsible for Palestinian refugees, of which there are over 5 million. It's probably one of the largest refugee populations, as you well know. And so I would only say that, being slightly protective of them, that they have a daunting challenge to try and meet the, because they're responsible for education, health, social welfare. Oh, I know the other question. And what about, there are other NGOs that are in the camps, like Caritas and other NGO organizations that do work in the camps, because and throughout Lebanon. Am I correct in that?
The NGOs, they do exist inside the camps, but they do not offer. See, any kind of NGO that comes from outside the camp, they usually have their own agenda, and Palestinians do not like that. We don't like people to give us services, and in return we have to do something for them that we do not believe in or we do not want. So many Palestinians do not actually cooperate with those NGOs. But as for the UNRWA question, it was not a question.
Really
I know they are now facing these problems, but they're facing these problems since 5 years. But speaking of before those 5 years, they've been the same. See? So now they're just giving the excuse that, okay, we're facing the problems. But before 5 years, before the Syrian refugee problem, before everything, they were just the same. So, yeah. I think there's someone else.
You told us that the people that are refugees from Palestine, they're not allowed to work, they can't own properties, they can't go into professions. Yet you told us that they can have a wedding, they can go to school, and some can go to a private school. Where do they get this pocket money from?
Black market, like we work unofficially or illegally. See, for example, I work as a freelance interpreter, but that's not like always. My dad, he's an engineer. He's a petrochemical engineer, and he had to work for a company, a Lebanese company. He was working illegally at that company because he's Palestinian. So each time the inspector used to come to the company, my dad had to go and hide in the basement until the people from the government left. And when my dad left the work, actually he didn't leave the work. The guy he fired him, and he did not give him his
Salary.
What is it?
Compensation.
Yeah, compensation. But there's another word.
Severance. You're required to be compensated.
Anyways, so the compensation for being fired. The compensation for being fired because he's Palestinian, and my dad could not do anything about it because he's working illegally. So that's basically how we do it. And that's how I went to a private school. And he was like, he had my all the employees had to work for like 8 hours. My dad had to work for 15 hours. Although he was, he was more educated than the people he was working for. And this is how all the Palestinians do it.
Why can't, because the Palestinians are a big population in Lebanon, why can't they make their own unions and then protest and fight for their rights?
Wow, you want the Lebanese to kill us?
Because
I mean, Lebanon, technically, it's a democracy. I mean, it's not like those dictatorships, like like Mosul.
We cannot form a state inside a state.
Not a state. I'm talking about like unions, like trade unions and stuff like that.
That's forming a state inside a state. Okay. We cannot do that.
And the second question is because I read that in the 50s that some Palestinians they tried to go back into Palestine and some of them succeeded, but in 1954 the Israelis they managed to get some of them and then they kicked them back out of Palestine. So I wanted to ask Al-Hajja, did she witness some people who tried to go into Palestine from Lebanon?
Yeah, I believe that some of her family members actually tried. حجة عم بسألك الشاب هون إنه قال بالخمسينات في ناس فلسطينية حاولوا يرجعوا على فلسطين من لبنان. فقال بتعرفي حدا انت رجع من لبنان لفلسطين؟
لبنان في عائلة من بيت الأشوح. المرة هي كانت تتحكم بنهاريا حتى تجيب أولاد وطلعت لهون وبدها ولد رجعت عشان هيك وهي من بلدنا بتكون.
She knows one family.
إذا هاي يعني هاي اللي بعرفها.
She knows a woman who used to go to a gynecologist in Naharia settlement. So after they
أنت من وين عم بدك؟
أنا من الضبط الغربية من عين يبرود رام الله.
يا هلا بيك.
جنب المخيم جلزون.
So there was a woman.
3/4 قرايبي بالضفة الغربية وبالخليل.
أنت معاش قرايب هناك؟
ها؟
معاش قرايب هناك؟
كل القرايب.
إن شاء الله بنزورهن.
إن شاء الله جميعا.
I mean, so she knows her neighbor. They fled together during 1948 and settled in Lebanon. And back in the 50s, that woman wanted to have kids, to have children. So she went back to Palestine to her gynecologist in Naharia settlement, who she was a Jew in Naharia, and she went back only for this purpose to to get.
ما بعرف إذا ماتت المرأة أما بعدها طيبة لأني أنا بشتاقني بالمخيم.
She doesn't know if the woman is still alive or not, though. Okay. Any more questions?
As Palestinians, we shouldn't re-traumatize ourselves to make ourselves aware or build solidarity. Solidarity should be a verb. So I wanted to ask you, what kinds of solidarity or resistance would you like to see from the movement? And my second question is, what kind of solution do you envision for the Palestinian cause, whether it's a one-state solution or a two-state solution? What do you envision the ultimate solution to be like?
See, as for the solidarity, I believe that one of the best things you guys here can do is more BDS, more boycott movement, and I believe any kind of anything small you guys do here is a form of solidarity. Attending this event is a form of solidarity, and also educating yourselves and educating your community and everybody around you. What was the second question?
Solution.
Okay, the solution. See, I am not a person to ask about solution. This is as I told you here, it is a problem that many countries caused. So it's not my job to look for a solution, but what I know is that Palestinians deserve justice after all these years. And I believe, as a refugee, the only justice that I can see is the right of return. And the only solution for us is the right of return to our lands, to our houses. I mean, I'm from Haifa. I want to go back to Haifa. Al-Hajja is from Kabri. She wants to go back to Kabri. I don't think she's going to be so happy to go back to any other part of Palestine. So I believe that's the only solution, justice.
And back to your original homes, not
to our lands, to our properties, how the law says.
Okay, so we want to thank our guests tonight.